So this final has been dubbed the worst final in history. Some people have called it Al Clownico, which is kind of not the easiest thing to say. I mean, both sides have had terrible seasons. United are 16th, Tottenham are 17th, basically one place above the relegation zone. But whoever wins will be in the Champions League next season. So that would cap a terrible season with an incredible prize. So Spurs, former Arsenal manager Arsene Wenger says that neither team should qualify for the Champions League, which seems a little bit harsh, but in terms of your perspective, guys, what do you think about this? Will it save the season? Rob, James, will it save Spurs Man United season by winning this?
I mean, in terms of United, they've been. I mean, Ruben Amorim has been quite clear that it won't save the season, and I think he has to say that because the league form has been so poor that you can't, as Man United manager, say that it's been a successful season when you're going to finish sort of 16th, 17th in the league. That said, I think there is a case to say that it will save it, because if you'd started the season saying that United would qualify for the Champions League and win a trophy, I think a lot of Man United fans would have taken that, given where they were. Obviously, it's not the way that they would want to do it. They would want to finish in the top sort of 4 or 5 of the Premier League and win a trophy in a different way. But just because it comes down to one game doesn't necessarily mean that it won't be a success. I think obviously there's massive improvement needed next season. They can't have the same season again because Ruben Amorim will go if that's the case. But in terms of being very, very early on in Ruben Amorim's reign, to win a trophy, get one under his belt really quickly, to qualify for next season's Champions League, to get the financial boost that will bring, I think there probably is a case for it, saving the season. It's just that Ruben Amorim can't say that.
James, Tottenham, 17 years since they won a trophy, pressure's on. Will it save their season? They have a different objective, don't they, United? It's not just about the Champions League, it's also about winning a trophy.
Yeah, I think, the word I used in the piece we've done on the site is existential, and I think that's what this is for Tottenham. In many ways, this season sort of distills the whole argument around the club for the last few years down to the most sort of extreme case, which is how much do you want to win a trophy? Do you want to win a trophy at all costs? Now, obviously, this one comes with the prize of Champions League football, but it's been an awful season for Spurs. They've lost 21 league games. Any other manager in any other situation would have been sacked by now had they not had the Europa League final on the horizon. So, obviously, the money would be good. Obviously, Champions League football will help them kick on next season, regardless. But really, this is about a team that is just desperate after 17 years to win something, anything, to validate themselves as a football club. I think we all agree they've got one of the best stadiums in the world. They've got one of the best training grounds in the world, but they have no trophies to show for it in the last 17 years. And I think Postecoglou put it pretty well at the media day, actually, where he said, this is a final which is about changing the way this club is perceived externally and also how it sees itself. And I think were they to lose this, it would sort of reinforce all of the sort of negative connotations of the club, the Spursiness, the faltering when the prize is in sight. But to win it would really be potentially transformative for the future.
I mean, I bumped into a former Spurs player a game last week. He played in the last time they won a trophy in the 2008 League Cup final, and he told me, they said that for Tottenham, he says, what you can't kind of quantify is how nervous the players will be. He said they'll be absolutely wrapped up with tension because they know exactly what you said, James, that it's about winning a trophy and getting rid of that tag of Spurs being the team that doesn't win anything. And, from United's perspective, it's all about, it's what it means to the club. Obviously, if you're a player, you want to win a trophy, but, I think United have shown, even in the last 10, 12 years where they've been really poor, they've won major trophies, they've won 5. But Spurs haven't won anything. And I think what adds to the pressure as well, you've got Newcastle, Crystal Palace have won trophies this season, either for the first time ever or for the first time in living memory. So there are clubs that are ending long, long waits. It's Tottenham's turn, but it doesn't work like that, does it?
No, and in many ways, in that context, United are one of the worst things they could have faced, because if there is an inferiority complex against the sort of established fellow members of the Big Six who do take home the trophies on a sort of regular basis, then it will be reinforced by playing a team like United, even though they're in a pretty dire straits themselves and a pale imitation of the club at their best. But look, I mean, I guess they've got to trust in Postecoglou, right? I mean, he's the winner there. He's done it before. He's the only one who's been there and done it. We're talking about Heung-min Son, captain in that team, potentially if he's fit to play, been there 10 years, never won a trophy. These are not players. Okay, they've got Christian Romero, who's won a World Cup with Argentina. They've got, they've had players in the past, Hugo Lloris, players who've won things with their countries, but as a group, there's no real winning mentality. There's no proven pedigree to get over the line and just do the things that you need to do in finals. That's the only thing that makes me think United have got the advantage when you think about Harry Maguire and Luke Shaw and Bruno Fernandes and these kind of players who've got, Casemiro, the one things, they know in finals, you don't make mistakes, you keep things simple, don't overcomplicate it and get the job done. And Spurs don't really have anyone they can rely on. And that's why it's such a big ask for them.
I mean, there is something which you can't quite put your finger on, but we've all been around European finals or big finals in the past, and when there's a big, historic superpower in the final, I go back to Madrid in 2019 when Liverpool played Tottenham. You just felt before the game that Liverpool would win it because whether it's the sea of red or the history, you just felt Tottenham were dwarfed by that in the stadium, outside the stadium. I think it affected the players. Now, United are a similar scenario to Liverpool, obviously not as good. It's not a Champions League final, but Rob, do you get the sense that United this week, from the interviews I've seen with the players, that they do seem to rely on that kind of, we're Man United, we win big finals? Did you get the impression that self-confidence is coming back because they are Man United and they get the job done when it matters in cup finals?
I think so. And James has touched on it there, that when you look at the two teams, I mean, United have been awful this season. There's no denying that. But in that team, you've got players like Casemiro, Harry Maguire, Bruno Fernandes, and Nana's played in a Champions League final before. They have got players who have been there and seen it. Now, I know that doesn't kind of quantify itself in terms of stats and how United have performed on the pitch, but there is that kind of, I don't know what it is, I don't want to call it an X factor, but it's that kind of thing that you kind of feel that maybe United have just got a little bit more of that than Spurs. And I actually thought, being at the media day the other day, that you could kind of feel that there was nothing really that was phasing those United players. They had an awful lot of media to do. They had photo shoots and interviews, but a lot of them have been there and seen it and done it. And you only have to look at the FA Cup final last year. Everyone went into that FA Cup final thinking that United would get absolutely battered by Man City, but they didn't. They turned up on the day. They had some big performances by some of their better players, and they managed to get over the line against it. Fair enough, the City didn't perform on the day, but United was still able to put in a performance to win the game and get themselves over the line. Now, I think if you look at the game in terms of how these seasons are panned out, there are reasons to worry for Man United. I think that Tottenham will score because that's what they do. They score goals, and United struggle to score goals. So when you look at it in those terms, you start to think, well, maybe Spurs do have the advantage. But I just think looking at the team, and as James has said there, I just think there are more United players who are going to know how to handle the occasion. It is a game for keeping it simple. You don't make mistakes. You let the other team make mistakes. And United have got more players who know how to do that. And you only have to look at kind of the way that Bruno Fernandes has performed all season. He's kind of had that mindset for most of the season and played really, really well in a really, really poor team. And it just feels like it's set up for United's big players, whether it's Fernandes, whether it's Casemiro, Harry Maguire scoring a late header, just something like that. It does feel to me like United have a slight advantage heading into it just because of that kind of mentality that they've got.
What do we see as the big kind of the big selection issues? Because I mean, obviously, Tottenham have got players coming back from injury. United have two. I mean, for me, I think it comes down to one particular position. I think United haven't got a centre forward. I think Rasmus Højlund isn't up to it. If he plays, that gives Spurs an advantage because United haven't got any control at that end of the pitch. So if I was Ruben Amorim, I'd play Mason Mount as a false nine and just take Højlund out of the equation. But I don't think he will do. So, I mean, James, what do you think? What's Ange Postecoglou's selection dilemma? Do you think he's got the team that can actually, as close to his strongest team as possible to win the final?
Well, I mean, one thing to just sort of balance out what we've been talking about is obviously Spurs have beaten United 3 times already this season. So, I mean, if we're just going purely on form, and I've seen people sort of making the point, if you went sort of like, player by player and you were building a combined 11, it would be almost entirely Spurs players, maybe even all of them, and minus Bruno Fernandes coming in for United. So sort of pound for pound, they are a better team, but they've got a major creativity problem now because obviously Maddison is out, Kulusevski's out, Lucas Bergvall is out. That has really ripped out the midfield. Appasar went off at the weekend. We don't know exactly how severe. that injury. If he's out as well, that's a huge blow on top of everything else. But the problem is going to be in midfield for him and in those attacking positions in terms of creativity. Do they have enough with Brennan Johnson, with Dominic Solanke, Richarlison maybe? Whether he goes with Odegaard, I don't know. But I mean, does he have enough with those players? Son, obviously, if he's fit to beat United, and they're not settled, Spurs. It just feels as though this game's come at the right time for United in terms of just the injury situations, respectively. And ultimately, we hear it every time from Ange Postecoglou. We are who we are, mate. We go and do what we do. We give it a go. We play how we want to play wherever we play. If they're that open and they're that naive in a final, they're going to lose. I think if they're a bit smarter and a bit cuter, and if the injuries actually force them to be a little bit more conservative in their approach, then they can find the right balance to win the game. But, that's Postecoglou's call to make. And everything we always hear about how uncompromising he is and, insisting that the players still believe in that mentality sort of suggests that they will go for it.
I agree what you're saying with United, with Højlund. I mean, obviously, Højlund's not playing well. He's not scoring goals, and he's also not playing well. So it's a massive problem for Amorim. But I think it may be too late in the season to start springing surprises and maybe playing Mason Mount or Kobbie Mainoo as a false nine. So I expect Højlund to start. The issue I think Amorim has got is Ugarte, because the team that Amorim has played all the way through this Europa League, or at least in the knockout rounds, is to have Casemiro and Ugarte as your two sort of deep-lying midfielders with Bruno Fernandes higher up the pitch. But Ugarte recently has been absolutely dreadful. He just gives the ball away too much. He's been bundled off the ball in midfield. He's been rushed. He looked panicked. And I think against Spurs, that's exactly what Spurs are going to try and do to United. They're going to try and press them and harry them and hassle them and just sort of force them off the ball. And if Ugarte's not at it, United are going to have a real problem in midfield. And I just wonder whether Amorim is maybe kind of going to rethink his approach a little bit and maybe drop Ugarte, start with Bruno Fernandes a little bit deeper, and then possibly play Mason Mount with Garnacho in those kind of two number 10 roles. Or you could play Kobbie Mainoo, or maybe it's Amad Diallo with Garnacho, with Højlund up front. I think Amorim will want to play Ugarte just because of what he thinks is the security that he brings him. But I just don't think Ugarte is playing well enough to start the game on Wednesday. I really don't. And I think, if you say that he's going to have to play Højlund just because there's no one else, I think his main selection issue is that in midfield. He's also got a few problems at the back. Obviously, De Ligt and Yoro aren't fully fit. It makes it complicated with what you do with Mazraoui. Do you have Mazraoui playing as a right wing back if Dalot's not going to make it, or do you need Mazraoui to play as a right-sided centre half? So there are little issues all over the pitch. I do agree with James. I think United are perhaps a little bit more settled than Spurs, which will help them. But there are little kind of decisions that Ruben Amorim is going to have to make, and he's going to have to get those right. Because I think if United lose this game, they lose it in the first 20 minutes. United are so vulnerable sometimes that it could be, they could be 3-0 down in 20 minutes. We've seen that before with this Man United team. But I think United are going to have to stay in the game for as long as possible. We've seen them time and time again get to half-time at 0-0. I think if that's the case, United go on to win. One thing that Amorim will be wary of is just to be getting blitzed in the first sort of 10, 15 minutes, and then there's no way back. So it'll be interesting to see what he does, particularly in that midfield area.
Can we just talk about the managers? Obviously, both managers go into the game having massively underperformed this season. But I think, I don't think any of us expect Ruben Amorim to go win, lose or draw. I think United are totally behind him. We don't know what he might do. He might win the trophy and think, right, I've had enough, and there you go, on my way. But I think the big question is around, isn't it, James? And it does seem that win or lose, Ange Postecoglou will be taking charge of his final Tottenham game on Wednesday night. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'm always wary to be definitive in these situations, especially ironically, we're talking about Manchester United in the same conversation, because of course of what happened with Erik ten Hag last season and how he stayed on after winning a big final right at the end. So it's not impossible, but all the signs are that Postecoglou will leave, win or lose. The view from what I'm told among the hierarchy at the club is that they've just lost too many games, that although there's been mitigating factors for that, we know that they've struggled with injuries and that's bad luck along the way. They've lost some tight games. You can't lose 21 league games as Spurs and there not be any repercussions at all. Now, if they were to go and win the Europa League emphatically, does that change things? Possibly. But it does feel as though the die has been cast already. And actually, from the way that Postecoglou sort of been talking, he's almost been hinting at the fact that he'll be all right, come what may, type thing. That sort of rhetoric sort of slipped into some of his press conferences of late, and it does sort of feel as though he probably thinks his numbers up.
Rob, Ruben, Amorim?
Yeah, I mean, I expected to stay regardless of the result. I bumped into one of the United execs not too long ago who is making no secret of the fact that this has been really, really tough since his appointment. They certainly were expecting some kind of bounce after bringing Amorim in. They weren't expecting the run of results that they've had. There's a little bit of sort of a mitigating factor in that they feel that some of the Premier League defeats recently have been down to the fact that they're trying to win this Europa League, and maybe Amorim hasn't picked the teams that he would have normally done in the Premier League. So that there's that, but they're making no secret of the fact that this has been really, really tough. The word from Man United is that he is absolutely rock solid. In terms of what the club feel about him, that he is rock solid this summer, and that they'll give him money to strengthen the squad over the summer. They'll bring in some of his players that he wants to play in this 3-4-3 system, and hope that the results pick up next season. I know that you've written a piece that's on site now about Amorim having a little wobble kind of around December, January time, and there certainly was a wobble in terms of him feeling that this was the right move for him. Everyone will know that he didn't want to join mid-season. He wanted to start in the summer. He told United that it was going to be tough, and what he predicted would happen has happened. I think it's probably worse than what he anticipated, but certainly that what he was expecting to happen has happened. So he's got that in his kind of, it's almost credit at the bank. It's not like he came in and said, I can turn this around immediately. He said this was going to be tough. He said that there was a storm coming, and there has been a storm. It's been dreadful. But I would expect him, win or lose on Wednesday against Spurs, I would expect him to be Man United manager at the start of next season. The issue comes for me in the next the first 10, 15 games of next season, because if the form replicated, if this season's form is replicated at the start of next season, he has got a massive problem, because there's a load of international breaks. We saw with Erik ten Hag in October, November international break, there was a lot of talk about his position, and eventually he got sacked. And if the form hasn't picked up, even if they win the Europa League, if United were to lose, 8 of the first 15 league games or something like that, or 5 of the first 10, there will be massive, massive pressure on his job, regardless of whether they're in the Champions League or not.
Yeah, I agree with that. The piece I wrote, I was told by, I think, 3 people at most, certainly in the last 2 or 3 weeks, that Amorim did offer to quit in January. Now, I checked it out with the club, and the response back was that there was no formal move to resign. And so the club's view is that didn't happen. So, but what I have been told is that he did need a lot of reassurance in January that he would be backed to see it through, that he was the guy. And he also questioned himself a little bit. I think he realised what he was walking into in November in terms of it was a bad situation, but didn't realise how badly. By the middle of January, I think the Brighton game was kind of at the tip of the iceberg when he came out and said that this is the worst in Man United's history. So he has had difficulties. And at the end of that month, he basically said, I'm 40 tomorrow, but I feel like I'm 50 after 2 months at Man United. So he's found it tough. But you're right. From what I've been told, United are absolutely 100% behind him. They really, really want it to work out. They believe he's the guy. But we have to say that he's had a terrible season, a terrible run of games. He lost 14 league games in his whole time in Portugal with over 3 or 4 years. He's now lost 14 league games in 6 months at Man United. So you can't argue with the statistics, but equally, the players at his disposal, by and large, are not good enough. They're nowhere near good enough. So if you've got a system of play, it's not going to work with those players because they're simply not up to it. And he has justified it by saying, look, I'm not going to change because before I came in, they played 4 at the back and they were still rubbish. So where do you go? At the end of the day, he's got a group of players, and let's name check some of them. Victor Lindelof, Diogo Dalot, Rasmus Højlund, Alejandro Garnacho. They're not good enough for Man United, and he's having to work with these players. Now, somehow he's got them to Europa League final with a chance of getting into the Champions League next season, which is kind of almost a miracle considering how bad they are. But I do think that there's no way that Man United will get rid of him. No way. Not in the next 6 months. But what I can't say, and I don't think any of us can say, is that he's such an emotional character. Somebody at the club was telling me that after matches, he does say a lot of things that he then backtracks on 2 or 3 days later. But he said he's really, the word he's used, he's really hot after games. That first half an hour after games, he's kind of very emotional. He says what he thinks, which is great. We want an honest manager, but he does backtrack a couple of days later when he's had time to calm down. But if he wins the Europa League on Wednesday, after the most difficult 6 months of his career, he might just think, guys, I've done my best. It's an impossible situation. There's your trophy. You're back in the Champions League, but I've got to get out of this situation. I don't think it'll happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if it did, because you just can't predict how this weird season at Man United is going to play out.
I would agree with that. And in my dealings with Ruben, he does feel like quite an emotional character. I mean, I think it says a lot about him as a person, as a character, that actually went to United. When United came calling in November, October, that he was strong enough to say, I don't want to start now. I want to start at the end of the season. Now, usually, if Man United or any big club in Europe come knocking and try to take you as a manager, your immediate answer is yes. And clearly that wasn't his immediate answer, because he didn't want to start in November. Now, obviously, he's decided that these opportunities don't come around very often, and that he felt, or certainly what United had told him, that if he didn't take it now, they would move on and look for someone else. So in the end, he's decided he wanted to take it. But I think that just shows the kind of character he is. And I wouldn't expect him to walk away straight away after Wednesday, but I do think there's going to be an issue possibly in the summer if he doesn't feel like that he's getting enough money to spend, or the players that he wants aren't coming in, or it's not the right player, or the transfer business isn't being done quickly enough. That you get to sort of the end of June, sort of early August, and he may look at it and think, well, this isn't getting any better. And he will know, he knows better than anyone, that if he doesn't start next season well, he will be under pressure from the first minute. If you can see a scenario where United don't play well in the first Premier League game of next season, they perhaps get beat against a team that they shouldn't be losing to, and immediately the knives are out for him, because Man United fans are willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for now, because they know how tough it's been to come in mid-season. But that excuse won't wash at the start of next season. So I just wonder whether, if things don't go particularly well in the summer in terms of transfer business, whether you might hear sort of murmurings about Ruben not being particularly happy, and that he doesn't know whether this is the right place for him, because he knows that I think that he thinks he can do this job, but I think that he thinks that he needs the perfect conditions to do it, and I don't think he thinks that he's got that right now, and he needs that to change in the summer.
Just on that point, Rob, about getting transfers done, I mean, we are talking ahead of the Europa League final, which will kind of have a massive impact on what United do next season and going forward, let's be honest. But moves are being made. It looks like Matheus Cunha from Wolves is a deal that's pretty close to being done. Liam Delap is another player that they're quite keen to get over the line. I think Cunha seems to be closer, but from what you've heard, Cunha does seem to be quite close, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect Cunha to get done. I mean, it's a relatively easy one for United to do, given that he's got a release clause. United historically have liked that kind of deal because they don't want to get caught up in negotiations over transfer fees. Obviously, that's not an issue with Cunha. You pay the release clause or you don't. I think the one issue that's been mentioned behind the scenes with Cunha is about personal terms. They don't want to get into a situation where he's asking for silly money. They want him to show that he wants to join Man United, because that's the kind of personality that they want. They don't want to be signing players who are only coming for the money. They want players who want to be here. So I think if Cunha, is reasonable in his wage demands, and I think the expectation is that he will. The United are slightly wary, perhaps that he might sort of ask for a little bit too much, but they don't see that as a significant problem. I think we're all expecting that to get tied up relatively quickly after the end of the season. Obviously, that's not going to solve everything. They need a centre forward. I know you've written before about Liam Delap and United's interest in him. They probably also need a midfielder. There's been interest in Adam Wharton at Crystal Palace. Again, there's doubt whether they could get him out of Palace, particularly because Palace are going to be in the Europa League next season. They're going to need quite a lot of work doing to that squad. It's not going to be the case where you can just bring one player in and solve everything. They need quite a lot.
Yeah, just on Tottenham, obviously, just balance it out. Winning or losing, how much of an impact will it have on their business this summer in terms of incomings and outgoings?
Well, I mean, the money will help, obviously, but I mean, they're actually in a pretty good position PSR-wise, Spurs. I mean, I don't think any Tottenham fan or anyone who covers Tottenham would be expecting them to suddenly start pushing the boat out and spend big money while Daniel Levy is still holding the purse strings. But by the same token, I think there is an ambition there to spend. The problem is, of course, is that they don't know who the manager's going to be. So I think they're going to have to make a quick decision on that, and then they'll get into the summer. But to sort of come full circle on all this, really, I mean, the money is very, very useful for Spurs, as it would be for any club, and it would make them more ambitious in the summer. But really, this is about winning a trophy. This is about showing the potential new signings, really, that this is a club you can win at, and not a club that you can turn up in a very nice stadium and a very nice training ground and watch other teams win. You can actually do the lot at Spurs, and that's why it's so important for us.
I mean, just before you guys get off to the press conferences later on, I'm going to make a prediction. Now, my predictions aren't usually very good, but I do think that with Tottenham getting players back, and I think they've got forwards who can score a goal. I'm going to go for Tottenham. I think Tottenham win this game. I think United are too limited up front, so I'm going to say Tottenham win this. I think they win it 3-1. I just think that United, like Rob said, if they start poorly, they lose. I'm going to go for Tottenham. 3-1, Europa League winners, end the misery. Somebody pointed out that, have you noticed this year that so a magpie won a trophy, an eagle won a trophy, and a live bird won a trophy. So is the cockerel going to finally get a trophy? I think it is.
It just Tom, the producer, who's a Spurs fan, is stood behind the screen, kind of talking to the fans as he walked past. And as Mark was talking, he was cheering and doing his little fist pumps. So I think
that's the usual reaction.
All the fans that are walking past are looking at him like he's going to. Yeah. I think United edge it. I think it's going to be tough. I think it's going to be relatively tight, but I think United edge it just because of what we spoke about before. I think United have got more players who get them over the line.
Go on, James.
Yeah, I have to say I agree. I think I just feel the game's come at the wrong time for Spurs. And while they do have the firepower, they are vulnerable at the back, and you just don't really ever feel confident in them in a big game. That has to change one day. I'm just not sure it'll be Wednesday.
Right, so Rob's in Bilbao. Rob's going to try and find some early arrivals in Bilbao, I think. So good luck, Rob. Try and find some fans that don't look as cold as you.